Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is under pressure amid growing accusations of corruption. Police have been investigating the Israeli leader for several months for crimes involving bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. Netanyahu's office has repeatedly denied any wrongdoing, calling the probe a witch hunt. But now Netanyahu's own former chief of staff and one-time close confidant Ari Haro has agreed to testify against him. Dan Raviv is a senior Washington correspondent for I-24 News. He's written extensively on Israel, and he's spent over 40 years here at CBS News. Dan, hey, welcome back. Good to see you here on our airwaves.
My pleasure, Rena.
Well, I want to ask you about these two cases against Netanyahu right now. Can you break them down for us?
Well, as you say, two cases. One of them people will understand. It seems simple. There's an allegation that Prime Minister Netanyahu and his wife Sarah were accepting gifts from very rich people, specifically, as a matter of fact, an Israeli-U.S. film producer in Hollywood. And so it's alleged that he kept on sending the Prime Minister cigars and champagne and wine. A lot of people can't figure out, well, what for? What did he want? Maybe they were just friends, and that's what Netanyahu says, it was just friends. The other case is a very strange negotiation that's alleged, in which Netanyahu was making a deal with a newspaper called Yediot Achronot, telling its publisher that if you stop publishing so many negative articles about me, I'll hurt your competitor. Netanyahu, as the prime minister, was thinking of ways of hurting another newspaper. So you could say, in a way, is that a bribe? That's a newspaper publisher saying, I'll do you a favor, Mr. Prime Minister, no negative articles, and you're going to help my business? Well, the prosecutors certainly are looking into it. The police have been interrogating witnesses. And as you say, the fact that a former chief of staff to Netanyahu, Ari Haro, is now turning state's evidence or state's witness, it could be very damaging for Netanyahu. It is thought that Haro knows everything about how Bibi Netanyahu's office worked, Rena.
You know, Dan, what's so fascinating about Ari is the fact that he has been so under the radar. When I spent time in Israel, this wasn't a guy who wanted to be up in front of the cameras. He was a confidant. How important do you think the fact that he turned state witness is for this case?
Close to the prime minister, almost a member of the family. By the way, Ari Haro is an American who moved to Israel. In the USA, in fact, he'd been one of the leaders of Friends of the Likud. The Likud is the political party that Netanyahu heads. And so, you know, for years, Haro's been doing things to help Netanyahu, and then absolutely on the spot in Israel as chief of staff until about 2 years ago. What happened is that the police found what they consider fraud by Ari Haro, an unrelated case, and so they reached what's being described as a plea bargain where Haro won't spend any time in prison, will pay a $200,000 fine, and agrees to testify against his friend and longtime boss, Netanyahu.
So we know Netanyahu is denying anything illegal here. What is he saying about these cases, though?
Well, first about the gifts, you know, from Hollywood. He says, you know, what's the big deal? Just gifts among friends. I didn't do any favors in exchange, so you don't call that bribery. As for talking with a newspaper, he says he was just talking with a newspaper publisher. Isn't that normal for a political leader to do? And so what Netanyahu is saying in general is that his enemies are out to get him, that there will be nothing from this because there is nothing, and he's standing firm, as you say, denying everything. And within Israeli politics, it's not like there's someone else in his Likud party pushing him out. Netanyahu is clearly the leader. He seems to be the only guy who can hold a governing coalition together, but there are rivals in other parties who would like to push him out, Rena.
Yeah, of course I'm sure there are. And Netanyahu, we know, and President Trump are close. Dan, do you think this will have any impact on the Israeli-U.S. relationship?
Well, in the sense that if Netanyahu is weakened, he's not able to make decisions. Don't forget that President Trump has vowed to somehow restart peace talks between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And President Trump has his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, working on that, and a former Trump lawyer, Jason Greenblatt, working on that. So the U.S. hasn't given up. But if it turns out that Bibi Netanyahu is weakened, well, it's hard to get any decisions, any dramatic decisions. Not that the chance of restarting peace talks was strong anyway. But Trump is likely to be sympathetic toward his old old friend Benjamin Netanyahu, but I don't think the U.S. can get Netanyahu out of this jam, Rita.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't seem that way at all. Well, this summer, there's been clashes on the ground there, Dan, between Israelis and Palestinians. What's the sense on the ground? Are they concerned that this could lead to more unrest?
Well, not because Netanyahu is having political problems, but Netanyahu, in order to shore up his base at this challenging time, has generally moving toward the right. Now, the left is defined as willing to make a deal with the Palestinians, give up territory in the West Bank, wanting to make peace above all. The right wing in Israel is very suspicious and skeptical, and that's where Netanyahu is placing himself right now, with some of his right-wing ministers, even members of other parties in his coalition. And so when it came to the attitude toward the unrest in Jerusalem and in the West Bank, Netanyahu tried to be super tough. On the other hand, the rioting got so bad that Netanyahu decided to remove the metal detectors from the Al-Aqsa Mosque neighborhood in Jerusalem. The result was that the right wing is angry at Netanyahu. One other thing, there are a lot of American Jews who are angry at him. They're, if you will, the more liberal Jews, because only 2 months ago, Netanyahu tore up a deal in which non-Orthodox Jews from all over the world could come and pray at the Western Wall in Jerusalem with men and women praying together. The Orthodox were against that. Netanyahu tore up the deal as he moved toward the right. So he's got people angry at him more than usual, Rena.
So ultimately, Dan, with this case, where do you see this going? Where's this all headed for Netanyahu?
Well, the police are certainly working on it in an intensive way. We believe that this weekend, the new witness, Ari Haro, is giving his testimony. There is an irony. We've also found out that he got permission from the police to come to the United States this coming week on a pre-scheduled family visit. All right, they're a little informal sometimes. The investigation's been going on for more than a year. I would have to tell you, at any time, the police could recommend an indictment. It could be Netanyahu. It could be his wife. It could be others who worked in the Prime Minister's office. We don't know what direction that'll head, and we don't know when. It could be at any time. If the police make the recommendation, then the Attorney General, who's generally a Netanyahu loyalist, would have to make the decision whether to bring charges, and then Israeli law doesn't require the Prime Minister to step down, but there'd be immense political pressure for Netanyahu to do so.
That's an interesting twist. I didn't know they don't require you to step down. Dan Raviv, thank you for joining us.